Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Welcome all to today's reading from Sri Chaitanya Charitamrit, Adi Lila, chapter 7. We'll be reading from verse 141 onwards. Mukam karoti vachalam, pangum langhayate girim yat kripa tamam vande Shri Gurum Dinitarinam, Paramananda Madhavam, Sri Chaitanya Ishwaram, Hari Om Tat Sat. भगवान प्राप्ति हेतु ये करी उपाय श्रवणादि भक्ति कृष्णा प्राप्तिर सहाय. Translation: It is only by devotional service beginning with hearing that one can approach the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That is the only means to approach Him. Purport: Mayavadi philosophers are satisfied simply to understand Brahman to be the sum total of knowledge. But Vaishnava philosophers not only know in detail about the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but also know how to approach Him directly. The method for this is described by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in 9 kinds of devotional service, beginning with hearing, that is Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, Pada Sevanam, Archanam, Vandanam, Dasyam, Sakhyam, Atmanivedanam. This is from Bhagavatam, 7th canto, 5th chapter, verse 23. The 9 kinds of devotional service are hearing about Krishna, chanting about Him, remembering Him, offering service to His lotus feet, offering Him worship in the temple, offering prayers to Him, working as His servant, making friendship with Him, and unreservedly surrendering to Him. One can directly approach the Supreme Personality of Godhead simply by executing these 9 kinds of devotional service, of which hearing about the Lord is the most important, Shravanadi. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has very favorably stressed the importance of this process of hearing. According to his method, if people are simply given a chance to hear about Krishna, certainly they will gradually develop their dormant awareness or love of Godhead. Shravanadi Shuddha Chitte Karaye Udaya. This is from Chaitanya Charitamrit, Madhya Lila, chapter 22, verse 107. Love of God is dormant in everyone, and if one is given a chance to hear about the Lord, certainly that love develops. Our Krishna consciousness movement acts on this principle. We simply give people the chance to hear about the Supreme Personality of Godhead and give them prasadam to eat, and the actual result is that all over the world people are responding to this process and becoming pure devotees of Lord Krishna. We have opened hundreds of centers all over the world just to give people in general a chance to hear about Krishna and accept Krishna's prasadam. These 2 processes can be accepted by anyone, even a child. It doesn't matter whether one is poor or rich, learned or foolish, black or white, old or still a child. Anyone who simply hears about the Supreme Personality of Godhead and takes prasadam is certainly elevated to the transcendental position of devotional service. So these purports, as we know, are written by Srila Prabhupada. Prabhupada ki jai. Verse 142, we are on the 7th chapter of Adi Lila from Chaitanya Charitamrit. Se sarva videra abhideya nama sadhana bhakti haite haya premera udgama. By practicing this regulated devotional service under the direction of the spiritual master, certainly one awakens his dormant love of Godhead. This process is called abhideya. Purport: by the practice of devotional service, beginning with hearing and chanting, the impure heart of a conditioned soul is purified, and thus he can understand his eternal relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That eternal relationship is described by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Jivera Swarupa Haya, Krishnera Nityadasa. The living entity is an eternal servitor of Supreme Personality of Godhead. When one is convinced about this relationship, which is called Sambandha, he then acts accordingly. So the relationship is the Sambandha. Now, acting accordingly after understanding, after getting convinced about the relationship, that is called Abhideya. The next step is Prayojana Siddhi, or fulfillment of the ultimate goal of one's life. If one can understand his relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead and act accordingly, Automatically, his mission in life is fulfilled. The Mayavadi philosophers miss even the first stage in self-realization because they have no conception of God's being personal. He is the master of all, and he is the only person who can accept the service of all living entities. But since this knowledge is lacking in Mayavad philosophy, Mayavadis do not have knowledge even of their relationship with God. They wrongly think that everyone is God or that everyone is equal to God. Therefore, since the real position of the living entity is not clear to them, how can they advance further? Although they are very much puffed up at being liberated, Mayavadi philosophers very shortly fall down again to material activities due to their neglecting the lotus feet of the Lord. That is called Patanti Adaha. Ye anye Arvindaksha Vimukta Maninas Tvai Ashtabhavad Avishuddha Buddhaya Aruhya Krichrena Param Padam Tatah Patanti Adho Anadrita Yushmad Angrayaha. This is from Bhagavatam, 10th canto, chapter 2, verse 32. Here it is said that persons who think themselves liberated but do not execute devotional service, not knowing their relationship with the Lord, are certainly misled. One must know his relationship with the Lord and act accordingly. Then the fulfillment of his life's mission will be possible. Verse 143. Krishnera charane haya yadi anuraga Krishna vinu anyatra tara nahi rahe raga. Raga is attachment, anuraga is also attachment. Translation: if one develops his love of Godhead and becomes attached to the lotus feet of Krishna, gradually he loses his attachment to everything else. As we know, all these verses are mostly in Bengali, and some are from Bhagavatam and Srimad Bhagavad Gita also. Translation: if one develops his love of Godhead and becomes attached to the lotus feet of Krishna, gradually he loses his attachment to everything else. Purport: this is a test of advancement in devotional service as stated in Srimad Bhagavatam 11.2.42. Bhaktihi pareshanubhavo viraktir anyatra cha. In bhakti, a devotee's only attachment is Krishna. He no longer wants to maintain his attachments to many other things. Although Mayavadi philosophers are supposed to be very much advanced on the path of liberation, we see that sometimes they descend to politics and philanthropic activities. Many big sannyasis who were supposedly liberated and very advanced have come down again to materialistic activities. Although they left this world as mithya, which is false, when a devotee develops in devotional service, however, he no longer has attachments to such philanthropic activities. He is simply inspired to serve the Lord, and he engages his entire life in such service. This is the difference between Vaishnav and Mayavad philosophers. Devotional service, therefore, is practical, whereas Mayavad philosophy is merely mental speculation. Verse 144. Panchama Purushartha se prema Mahadhana Krishnera Madhurya Rasa Karaya Aswadana. Panchama is fifth, Purusha is Artha is goal of life, telling about the synonyms there. Say that, prema love of God, Mahadhana foremost wealth, Krishnera of Lord Krishna, Madhurya conjugal love, Rasa mellow, Karaya causes, Aswadana taste. Translation: love of Godhead is so exalted that it is considered to be the fifth goal of human life. By awakening one's love of Godhead, one can attain the platform of conjugal love, thus tasting it even during the present span of life. Purport: the Mayavadi philosophers consider the highest goal of perfection to be liberation, which is mukti, which is the fourth perfectional platform. Generally, people are aware of four principal goals of life: religiosity, dharma; economic development, artha; sense gratification, karma; and ultimately liberation, which is moksha. But devotional service is situated on the platform above liberation, above the mukti, above the liberation. In other words, when one is actually liberated or mukt, he can understand the meaning of love of Godhead. Krishna Prema. While teaching, Rupa Goswami Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu stated, Koti Mukta Madhye Durlabha Eka Krishna Bhakta. Out of millions of liberated persons, one may become a devotee of Lord Krishna. The most elevated Mayavadi philosopher can rise to the platform of liberation, but Krishna Bhakti, devotional service to Krishna, is transcendental to such liberation. Srila Vyasadeva explains this fact in Srimad Bhagavatam 1.1.2. Dharmaha projita ketavo atra paramo nirmat sharanam satam vedyam vastavam atra vastu shiva dam tapa trayonamulam. Completely rejecting all religions which are materially motivated, the Bhagavad Puran propounds the highest truth, which is understandable by those devotees who are pure in heart. The highest truth is reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all. Such truth uproots the threefold miseries. Srimad Bhagavatam, the explanation of the Vedanta Sutra, is meant for Paramo Nirmat Saranam, those who are completely aloof from jealousy. Mayavadi philosophers are jealous of the existence of the personality of Godhead, therefore the Vedanta Sutra is not actually meant for them. They unnecessarily poke their noses into the Vedanta Sutra, but they have no ability to understand it because, as the author of the Vedanta Sutra writes in his commentary Srimad Bhagavatam, it is meant for those who are pure in heart, Paramo Nirmat Saranam. If one is envious of Krishna, Nirmat Sharanam. If one is envious of Krishna, how can he understand the Vedanta Sutra or Srimad Bhagavatam? The Mayavadi's primary occupation is to offend the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna. For example, although Krishna demands our surrender in the Bhagavad Gita, the greatest scholar and so-called philosopher in modern India has protested that it is not to Krishna that we have to surrender, therefore he is envious. Since Mayavadis of all different descriptions are envious of Krishna, they have no scope of understanding the meaning of the Vedanta Sutra. Even if they were on the liberated platform as they falsely claim, love of Krishna is beyond the state of liberation, a fact stated by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and repeated here by Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami. We know the author of Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita is Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami. Verse 145. Prema haite Krishna haya nij bhakta vasha Prema haite paya Krishnera seva sukha rasa. Synonyms or the word-to-word meaning. Prema is love of Krishna. Haite from Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Haya becomes Nija, his own. Bhaktavasha, submissive to devotees. Prema, love of God. Haite from. Paya, he gets. Krishnera, of Lord Krishna. Seva Sukharasa, the mellow of devotional service. Translation: the Supreme Lord, who is greater than the greatest, becomes submissive to even a very insignificant devotee because of his devotional service. So this is the love of God. It is the beautiful and exalted nature of devotional service that the infinite Lord becomes submissive to the infinitesimal living entity. Because of it, in reciprocal devotional activities with the Lord, the devotee actually enjoys the transcendental mellow of devotional service. Purport: becoming one with the Supreme Personality of Godhead is not very important for a devotee. Mukti swayam mukulitanjali sevate asman Krishna Karnamrita 107. These words are from there. Speaking from his actual experience, Srila Bilva Mangal Thakur says that if one develops love of Godhead, mukti, liberation, becomes subservient and unimportant to him. Mukti stands before the devotee and is prepared to render all kinds of services. The Mayavadi philosopher's standard of mukti is very insignificant for a devotee. For by devotional service, even the Supreme Personality of Godhead becomes subordinate to him. An actual example is that the Supreme Lord Krishna becomes the chariot driver of Arjun, and when Arjun asked him to draw his chariot between the two armies, Senayor Ubhayor Madhye Ratham Sthapaya Me Achyuta. This is what Arjun says to Krishna, Krishna executed his order. Such is the relationship between the Supreme Lord and the devotee, that although the Lord is greater than the greatest, he is prepared to render service to the insignificant devotee by dint of his sincere and unalloyed devotional service. So these were the famous shloka from the Bhagavad Gita. Verse 146, Sambandha abhideya prayojana nama etina artha sarva sutre paryavasana. Sambandha is relationship, abhideya functional duties, prayojan the goal of life, nama name, there, tina three, artha purport, sarva all, sutre in the aphorism of the Vedanta, paryavasana culmination. Translations: one's relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, activities in terms of that relationship, and the ultimate goal of life, to develop love of God. These three subjects are explained in every aphorism of the Vedanta Sutra, for they form the culmination of the entire Vedanta philosophy. Purport: in Srimad Bhagavatam, 5th canto, 5th chapter, 5th verse, it is said, Parabhavas tavad abodh jato yavan na jigyanasta atma tattvam. A human being is defeated in all his activities as long as he does not know the goal of life, which can be understood when one is inquisitive about Brahman. It is such inquiry that begins the Vedanta Sutra. Athato Brahma Jigyasa, a human being should be inquisitive to know who he is, what the universe is, what God is, and what the relationship between himself, God, and the material world. Such questions cannot be asked by cats and dogs, but they must arise in the heart of a real human being. Knowledge of these four items, namely oneself, the universe, God, and their internal relationship, is called Sambandha Gyan, or the knowledge of one's relationship. When one's relationship with the Supreme Lord is established, the next program is to act in that relationship. This is called Abhideya, or activity in the relationship with the Lord. After executing such prescribed duties, when one attains the highest goal of life, love of Godhead, he achieves Prayojana Siddhi, or the fulfillment of his human mission. In the Brahma Sutra or Vedanta Sutra, these subjects are very carefully explained. Therefore, one who does not understand the Vedanta Sutra in terms of these principles is simply wasting his time. This is the version of Srimad Bhagavatam 1.2.8. Dharmaha swa anushtitaha pumsam vishwaksena kathasu yah notpadayed yadi ratim shrama evhi kevalam. One may be very learned scholar and execute his prescribed duty very nicely, but if he does not, ultimately becomes inquisitive about the Supreme Personality of Godhead and is indifferent to Shravanam, Kirtanam, hearing and chanting, all that he has done is but a waste of time. Mayavadi philosophers who do not understand the relationship between themselves, the cosmic manifestation, and the Supreme Personality of Godhead are simply wasting their time, and their philosophical speculation has no value. So we shall continue our reading from here onwards next time. We have read about the Sambandh, Abhideya, Prayojan, and then about what is the highest goal of life. It is not just mukti or liberation, it is beyond that, which is devotional service to the Lord. This chapter, chapter 7, is indeed so sweet. This chapter is entitled Lord Chaitanya in 5 Features, and we have covered up to 147 or 48 verses by now, 47 I think, and we still have to go through up to verse 171 to finish this chapter. Thank you for joining. Hari Om Tat Sat. Hare Krishna. Happy Padashi to everyone. Hope you all had a lovely Ekadashi yesterday.